Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, a place for men to be men and talk about masculinity and men's issues. I'm your host, Brian Krall, and today I'm going to be mansplaining to you about female manipulation tactics. But first, could you hit that like button for me? Because any women who watch this are going to be hitting the dislike button, and that's no good for the channel. Now, this is part one of a two-part series because female manipulation tactics are so numerous in quantity that I cannot teach them all to you in just one video. So this is part one, in which I'm going to be teaching you the first half, or the basic female manipulation tactics. And in the next video, I'll be teaching you the more advanced ones. See, I used to be a social scientist and sex educator, as you probably know by now. So I've been able to observe all of these female manipulation tactics. And as a social scientist, I've been able to do so in such a way where I've created an inventory of just about every manipulation tactic that women use. So I'm going to share this list with you so that you will be able to detect when a woman is attempting to manipulate you, so you won't be fooled by any of their tricks and games and such, and will also be prepared to respond appropriately. And I've listed these in order, basically from least to greatest or worst, or from the lesser or the lighter ones to the more hardcore and evil. So you'll be surprised at just how far female manipulation goes when you get to the end. So make sure you watch this to the very end so that you can learn about all of these, because whatever ones you don't know about could be the ones that women are able to use on you and get away with, so they can get the better of you and take advantage of you. The first is denial without debate. This is where a woman says you are wrong, but then refuses to debate or discuss it, basically relying upon the premise that the last word wins, right? Or they might claim to have knowledge that you don't, but won't explain it to you. I have superior knowledge, but I'm not going to tell you what it is because you're inferior. No, they may even claim that this discussion is beneath them and try to make you out to be too stupid for them to even bother wasting their time discussing it with. So some examples of denial without debate are, no, trust me, I took a class on this. I don't have time to school you on it. Just take my word for it. Or, there's plenty of evidence. You'll have to look it up, all right? You have a lot of research to do. I can't sit here and educate you if you won't educate yourself. Or, believe what you want, that doesn't make it true, but I'm not going to argue with you. Or, this kind of argument is beneath me. I have more important things to do than talk to you. Or, I'm not going to listen to a white man talk about female issues that he has no business talking about. Or, you don't know what you're talking about. Or they might even just say, can you just leave me alone? And then call you a name like stupid. They might say, stop mansplaining, or accuse you of lying. And then they might just say very little. If this is like over social media or text messaging, they might just say no, or LOL, or laugh at you. This is something someone does to make themselves seem, in their mind at least, superior to you and the whole debate in question. And they're putting in whatever 2 cents they are to just deny what you've said, but then they're not debating it with you. And it's because they are actually wrong and have nothing to say of value about it. Wouldn't be able to hold their own in a debate. The next is lying. This can happen in a number of ways. White lies are women's favorite. They're small, subtle, and seemingly innocuous, and thus hard to catch. But often white lies occur in these sort of webs, and if you start to peel back one side of the web, a whole false reality that she's been painting for you gets exposed. Lying is too big of a topic for me to cover all the different ways women lie, but I just wanted to say, something to watch for is lying by omission or half-truths. These are common manipulation tactics when it comes to lying, where they will give you half of a story and purposely omit certain information that they don't want you to know, which is the same as lying. I mean, it is being deceitful. They haven't told you something that was not true, except for the fact that that is all there is to know, right? Which it isn't. So, if a woman's not sharing something she really should and only shares one part of the truth, that's a half-truth, and that counts as a lie and means that there is some sort of greater deception going on. And, you peel back that layer. If you investigate a little, you'll see that there's probably a larger game that she is playing with you. And there might be other forms of deception going on that is connected to and meant to cover up, like cheating, which is, again, it's a form of deception. So it's similar to lying, and usually forms of deception go together, right? So when someone cheats, they also have to lie, at least doing a half-truth or a lie by omission. If you're catching a woman telling a story that's only half true, right, or lying by omission, there's probably much greater deceptiveness at play. Although, of course, there is also full outright lying, in which they completely fabricate something and try to make you believe a falsehood is true, which women also do all the time, and can even turn into gaslighting, something I'm going to talk about in the next videos. That actually is going to get a whole video of its own even. But the next one is censorship and filtering. If a woman cannot argue with you or with certain types of debates, and she must try to then preemptively end the argument before it begins, or before she even has a chance to lose it, by telling you that you aren't allowed to use your speech in the way that you were. And only approved speech is allowed, which is called filtering. Right, so examples of this that are oftentimes hard to catch, don't seem like censorship and filtering, but they are, is when a woman says things like positive vibes only. That little motto or mantra is a example of censorship and filtering that is done in the New Age community, and by a lot of women, not even in the New Age community, because they can't handle negativity. So they'll say positive vibes only, I don't need that kind of negativity here. But then they end up saying that to silence people from sharing socio-political opinions, right? That happened to me recently. It's happened to me many times before. They frame it as though they're being helpful by being positive. They're trying to create a positive vibe space or something, right? But all it really is censorship and filtering. Other examples would be, don't talk to me like that. This is oftentimes something a woman will do if no other defense. They'll make it seem like you're somehow attacking them and say, don't talk to me like that. And, you know, when they do this to me, I'll just say, talk to you like what? And they won't be able to tell me what I did or said wrong. Or they might say something that's just like completely bogus. Like, you know, I detect a rude vibe, you know, or something. I'm like, what? You're not telling me that I've said or done anything wrong. And even so, the woke people out there often will. You know, they'll say something like, you can't say that, it's inappropriate, right? It's insensitive. Or conservative people, old-fashioned traditional people will often say, you know, you can't talk like that, it's rude and disrespectful. So being told that your language is taboo, it is offensive to someone, and thus it's not a part of polite society, is a way of filtering certain political and social issues that people don't want to hear, right? That might be offensive to them. Even when you are speaking in a very politically correct manner, being very polite, you know, then that's when you know that it is just censorship. A way that feminists will do this is telling men to stop mansplaining. That's them filtering men's words and giving them the opportunity to, you know, then tell the man what he should have said and exactly how he should be speaking. I used to be told not to mansplain when I was talking about female anatomy, you know, as a sex educator. And I would be told that what I was saying was false or wrong. And they would then tell me what to say, which was basically synonyms for what I had said. It was saying the same exact message, but in their female words, right? So that is a really sort of, I guess, insidious manipulation tactic there that, you know, these political feminists use with men. You know, and telling someone something they said is offensive to someone, that they need to stop what they're saying, apologize, and then, you know, do a reversal. It often works on a lot of celebrities, but, you know, don't let that shit work on you. Saying those words are rooted in patriarchy and are a form of violence against women. Or you can't talk to me like that, you're making me uncomfortable, and that's harassment. You know, these are some of the manipulative ways that women use censorship these days. The next is a woman stating her credentials. This is a sort of next level version of denial without debate, is where a woman, instead of responding to what you've said with opposing arguments and information, she just states her credentials to try to trump your status in the argument, and then basically make it seem like anything she says is going to be better than what you say. You know, this is the paradigm women mentally operate in, right? And a woman may not have a better argument to make than the one you've just made, but, you know, may want to then act like out of narcissism or a superiority complex, like she doesn't need to, due to her credentials, and say something like, I have a degree in XYZ or whatever, gender studies or liberal arts. So no, but it could be an actual degree of expertise in some area, you know, but the point is she's bringing up that she has a degree, and, you know, she'll say, I'm sure that I know more about it than you do. Or I've been in this business for X number of years, so I think I know what I'm doing, you know? And this especially works when a woman is much older. And this is something that I really hate as a guy in his 30s, is that women in their 60s will just, lord their age over me like it gives them some sort of inherent superiority. And they'll say things like, oh, you're just a baby. I've been in this business for 35 years, I think I know what I'm doing. Or they might say something like, don't tell me my business. I've been doing this for, 2 decades, or I've been doing this my whole life, which is a lot longer than you have, so I think I know better. And it's like, okay, great, but you didn't refute what I just said. Again, because it's just a manipulation tactic, because they can't refute what you said. So another manipulation tactic is changing the subject. If they know they can't argue, they could potentially win by trumping you again, making themselves look better than you by changing the subject to one that makes you look bad. All right, so this could take the place of them, instead of answering a question you pose to them, they'll pose a question that turns the tables on you, such as saying, like, who hurt you? Or you must hate women, right? Or have you even studied this in college? Or have you ever even been in a real relationship? Or have you ever even been married? Or, it could be even more patronizing than that, insulting even. Like, you've never even had a girlfriend, have you? So that's a way of changing the subject. Instead of answering the debate, just changing the subject to one that makes you look inferior. Then there's feigned ignorance, pretending not to understand the reason or logic or evidence or facts or data you present to them, even after you explain it to them, even more than once. They may continue saying the same things, such as, oh, how can that be? Or, I don't get it. Or, it doesn't make any sense. So this has happened with me in a lot of debates against feminists, who will combine this with lying by omission when they say things like, there's no such thing as sexism against men, right? And they talk about rape culture. And I present, the debates, obvious debates you could think of. And they say things in response like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I've never heard of a woman raping a man before. So how could it happen? Right? And it's like, well, I just told you all about, the domestic violence statistics and female predatory behaviors and all the ways women are sexist towards men. And they will pretend like they don't get it and just continue saying, well, no, that doesn't make any sense. There's no such thing as sexism against men. There can't be. Or, there's no such thing as sexual assault against men. There can't be. And, we do live in a rape culture. So now it's worth noting here that some women really are just that stupid and ignorant. So, you really can't underestimate human stupidity. I'm constantly surprised by the lengths that human stupidity goes to. So some people really are that stupid where you could present them with basic logic and information and facts, and they will just not be able to understand it. But most of these women, I think, are just using this as a manipulation tactic. So that is feigned ignorance. The next one, similarly, is feigned innocence. So similarly to feigned ignorance, this is a denial without debate. They're not arguing with you, but in this case, they are trying to get out of the argument by putting on an innocent act. So this often happens when you've caught a girl doing something wrong, or are accusing her of something, or perhaps are accusing women in general of being a certain way that she also definitely is. And instead of debating or making excuses, they will just feign innocence. So paired with denial and or feigned ignorance, this would take the place of her putting on this sort of cartoonish act and behaving like just a sweet, innocent little girl who isn't capable of doing anything wrong, or acting as though women in general are innocent and pure and aren't capable of evil and such things. Either way, you should know that when a girl isn't debating, but is just feigning ignorance or innocence, it is a deception, and you should take it as an admission of guilt. The next is beating around the bush or bullshitting. So this is where she will actually respond, right? But they'll pussyfoot around the topic at hand and just spout some generic bullshit, right? Because she can't think of a way to directly refute your point. So they avoid it by beating around the bush and attempting to talk circles around you and probably speak in generic cliches. Like a recent example that I saw was when these stupid liberal college kids were being interviewed about how they felt about Kamala Harris, and they all, of course, supported her. And then when some negatives were brought up about her, they wouldn't address the topic directly. They just, sort of go back to babbling about, I think that Kamala Harris is doing a great job because she's empowering women and minorities by being the first female minority vice president. And that's why I love her. And, I think she's just so inspiring. And anyone who doesn't is probably a racist. It's like just bullshitting you, basically. All right. And you can tell they're doing this when they are not responding specifically to what you say, right? They're not responding in detail or specifics. They're using a lot of generic cliches and just sort of beating around the bush. The next manipulation tactic is quoting someone credible. When they can't think of their own retort, a woman may just call upon a quote from someone, it could be someone famous, or it could be their gender studies professor, it could be like Susan B. Anthony or Oprah or whoever. Even if it's kind of like a non sequitur that doesn't even really address what you said specifically. Again, this is how you could tell you're being manipulated. And even if the quote is not even something that person actually said or didn't say word for word, it could be just some generic meme from the internet. This has happened with quotes from like Marilyn Monroe, saying things like, well, if a man can't handle a woman at her worst, he doesn't deserve her at her best. Apparently she didn't actually say that, but something women love quoting Marilyn Monroe as having said whenever a woman's bad behavior is being called out. So that is how they manipulate their way out of that, by quoting someone credible, or in this case, misquoting them. And speaking of misquoting, that is the next manipulation tactic. And you're being manipulated when a woman misquotes you. So when a woman misquotes you, she says that you said something you didn't actually say. This is something all of my girlfriends, I think, have done at one point or another when we were in arguments. And how I knew I was being manipulated, because I know what language I use. I know the words that I like to use, and words that, while I may know them and know their meaning, I haven't really used them. And I'll just say, I've never said those specific words in my life. I've never said that sentence in my life. Why are you misquoting me like that? Now, maybe some of these girls are actually crazy enough that they may misremember what you said. Maybe they're just paraphrasing you innocently, but in many cases, they're misquoting you purposely because it's a manipulation tactic. And the next manipulation tactic is called red herrings. This is when a woman will focus on one aspect of what you said rather than the whole sentence and message and issue. And then we'll focus in on that one thing and then steer the whole conversation in another direction based off of that, deflecting away from the issue that she wants to avoid talking about and focusing on something else that she does. They could also do this by just focusing on one key word and then just changing the topic based upon that as like a pivot point. Politicians like Kellyanne Conway do this all the time. When asked a question that they don't have an answer for and that would make them look bad, they will take one thing from the question and then say, I think the real issue is, why aren't we talking more about that? Because that has a lot going on with it. And then they'll continue going off on the tangent as much as they possibly can. Just basically start ranting and raving in order to do so. What this is doing is using the fact that you have a limited time and energy to debate with them. And so even though this ploy is fairly obvious, it's useful because if they are able to go off on enough tangents and ramble on and on with them for long enough, eventually they will accomplish their goal of not losing the argument by not giving you any negative information that you could use against them. That is what you have been trying to get, right? And never getting them to admit to being wrong, and always steering the conversation away from things that would look negative for them and into things that would look more positive for them, talking about things that they want to talk about. And eventually the conversation will be over because the time that you both have to talk is up. And they won't have self-incriminated. They will have succeeded in steering the conversation to avoid any obstacles that will be detrimental to them. So even though you can see them doing that, it doesn't matter to them, because what really matters is that they haven't had to talk about anything they didn't want to, or admit anything they didn't want to. So it's an interesting manipulation tactic, kind of funny, and yet it still works. And it's surprising how women can at times even get away with manipulation while being obvious about it. The next manipulation tactic is feelings over facts. And that is when you state a fact and they disagree, not by refuting the facts, but by talking about their feelings. Often with a sentence that starts with the phrase, I just think that, or I just feel that. And then they share their personal opinions rooted only in emotion, not even really debating what you just said, but basically just speaking poetically and stating how they see things idealistically, as they wish they were, because that's what makes them feel good. So, for instance, you could say something against the institution of marriage, and the woman might say, I just think marriage is such a beautiful thing. There's someone out there for everyone, and love conquers all. And it's sad that someone might not believe that. They're just talking about their feelings and ideals. And then the next manipulation tactic is black and white thinking, right? Or putting things into some sort of black and white terms, which is basically either a binary of good or bad, or it's like all or nothing thinking. So when a woman, for instance, acts like everything in gender is black and white, so men are always wrong and women are always right. They will say something like, well, women are, insert positive adjective here, and men are, insert negative adjective here. For instance, women are valuable. We deserve respect, so you need to listen to us. We don't have to listen to men or put up with your toxic bullshit because men are just a bunch of pathetic incels, or women are more sexually sophisticated than men. Men are just a bunch of sexual apes. That is a direct quote taken from a feminist sex educator, in fact. And so you can see how that type of black and white thinking is obviously misandry, but any type of putting things into this sort of black and white binary is a manipulation tactic. And then the next manipulation tactic are double standards, saying the same standards do not apply to both men and women, that what goes for women does not go for men and vice versa. So when feminists say men need to be punished for bad things they do to women because they are so toxic and they need to be taught a lesson. But if a woman does something to a man, they say she should be let off because there's probably a good reason for it. He must have deserved it. Women constantly use double standards in arguments so that the same truths don't apply to both genders, which enables them to always be right and accuse men of always being wrong. And double standards is another word for hypocrisy. So anytime a woman is being hypocritical and saying you should do something while doing another herself is manipulating you. And then one of the more subtle and manipulative ways that women use double standards, and debates especially, is when they do what is called moving the goalposts. Moving the goalposts is when women act like they need less evidence than you to prove themselves right, but you need much more. In many cases, no matter what you say, it will not be good enough for her, and they will rely upon very little to try to make their own points, like again, just their feelings or something. And then again, they will act like nothing you say refutes what they have said, even when it obviously does. For instance, feminists do this when citing how one woman has done something good proves that women in general can do anything. But no amount of good men is ever enough to prove to them that men aren't inherently bad. So they'll say, see, these female inventors invented some useful things. That shows that all women can be captains of industry. Never mind that these inventions were actually previously invented by men, and never mind that men have been building society and pioneering industries since time immemorial. There have been some men who haven't, and who have turned out to be bad men. So they focus on those, and then make it seem like they represent all men, and that all men are bad. So that type of debate tactic is very manipulative. It is basically like the opposite of the apex fallacy, which if you haven't seen my video on that, click the link below and make sure that you check it out. Then the next manipulation tactic is saying that one wrong thing you say equals everything wrong, right? Like everything else that you've said is wrong, or maybe everything about you. And this is something that often used to happen to me as a sex educator when feminists would hear me talking about things like female anatomy or female sexuality. And they would then look for one potential thing to disagree with so that they could then say, you're wrong, and since you said this one wrong thing, everything about you is wrong. A woman will find fault with one wrong thing you say or do, or one thing you said or did wrong in the past even, and then we'll say that because of that one thing, that everything else you do and ever have done is wrong. And maybe they won't always be so grandiose with it and large scale with it, but do pay attention for that type of manipulative argument tactic where a woman will take one tiny little part of something that you said and say, well, that one part of that one sentence is actually wrong, and then use that to make broad sweeping statements about everything else that you say is going to be wrong by association because it's part of the same messaging. Watch out for that, because that's something that women do a lot. They'll want to make it seem like if they can disprove one thing you said, that they can somehow use that to disprove your entire message. And then similarly, the next manipulation tactic is semantics and attacking your word choice, the specific ways in which you are using words. They will claim that the way you have described things and your choice of words that you used makes you wrong, even though it doesn't, because your message isn't wrong and the information isn't wrong. It's really that they don't like the words you have chosen to describe the information, right? So they again may accuse you of mansplaining, or will say that you are wrong because of how you said it, because of how you described it, you are wrong. And then we'll restate things in their own words, which may even just say the same facts, but with their own sort of more poetic choice of words, or maybe politically correct choice of words, right? So watch for that semantic manipulation, and don't let anyone accuse you of being wrong because you're using synonyms for other words they would have preferred. And then the next manipulation tactic, something else women love doing with words, is redefining them. Women will oftentimes poetically redefine words or manipulatively use language in such a way as to change its meaning in order to make something negative sound positive. As you'll often see politicians do, like when Hillary Clinton once said, well, let's not call them GMOs anymore, because she was in bed with Monsanto, right? So she says, GMOs have gotten a bad rap, so let's not even think of them as GMOs anymore. Let's call them something else. Women are constantly doing this. A female politician recently denied the definition of the word recession. What's that Haitian spokeswoman for Biden? You probably know what I'm talking about. She denied the definition of the word recession in order to say that we are not in one. And in the social and dating world, women have created a body positive movement, changing the label of fat women to big, beautiful women, and are now trying to even redefine the word hot to mean any woman who wants to label herself as such. So when you refute a woman's argument and show how she is wrong, and there is something actually negative about what she said, she may just start redefining the meaning of words and using this sort of overtly poetic language in order to run circles around you with her sentences, even if it doesn't really make sense and has no basis in reality. And the next manipulation tactic is willful misinterpretation. If you've seen that famous Jordan Peterson interview with that blonde, curly-haired feminist woman, you're very familiar with this one. It goes like this. So what you're saying is that women don't deserve equal rights. So what you're saying is women should be subservient to men. She just kept on purposefully misinterpreting what he said in some sort of negative way, claiming that is what he said when it wasn't. And women will use this tactic even to make unrelated things seem related, because what they're doing is they're saying, so what you're saying is that X equals Y. So for instance, if a feminist wanted to do this with a MGTOW man, she could say, so if you don't think marriage works, what you're saying is that women don't need a man. See how using misinterpretation, a manipulator can make anything you say mean what she wants it to mean and prove any point she wants. That is the power of willful misinterpretation. And then similar to this deliberate misinterpretation, the next manipulation tactic is called the straw man fallacy. This could even be said to be a form of deliberate misinterpretation, because the straw man is about taking what you said and exaggerating it, and to an extreme. And so when you exaggerate something to an extreme, you basically make a mountain out of a molehill. You can make something seem bad that wasn't originally, right? So this could be done by taking what you said out of context and displacing it into an irrelevant situation, or it could be used to oversimplify something and make just broad sweeping generalizations about a very nuanced issue. Or it could be done in such a manner as to make what you said sound absurd and comical, right? So exaggerating it to absurdity and thus discrediting you. Or with women who are more vicious, it could be used to make you seem like a threat, even. For instance, when feminists say, if you aren't a feminist, you don't believe in the equality of women, and you must think we deserve to be kept prisoners in our homes and made to do slave labor and be beaten by our husbands. That is straw man fallacy. So watch out for that. And then lastly, the final manipulation tactic for this video at least is the baited question. The baited question is a form of loaded question, but even worse than a normal loaded question because this one is loaded with bait. Bait that is meant to hook you into an admission of guilt. So this is when a woman will ask you a question that has no right answer. And any answer you could give that acknowledges the reality of the question at all will reflect negatively on you or make you look guilty of whatever it is, she's trying to set you up for. So this could be a woman you have started dating who is trying to fish for information to see if you are or ever have been a cheater. So she might pose a question like, why do you think it is that all men have cheated at some point in their life? Or even more craftily, when do you think that cheating is justified? Or a feminist may ask baited questions in order to prove all men bad by saying things like, why do you think it is that all masculinity is in some way toxic? Or why do you think it is that all men have harassed a woman or even been predatory at some point? Or why do you think it is that all women have or will be harassed by a man at some point in their lives? These are baited questions that have no right answer. So anytime a baited question is asked, don't take the bait. You must refute the validity of the question in order to avoid becoming a guilty party. So don't answer except to say, I can't answer that question because it isn't based on any facts. So those are the basic female manipulation tactics, and that concludes this part 1 in the series. I hope I mansplained them well enough for you guys out there. Thank you for listening, and be sure to share your own thoughts and opinions on these by commenting below. And if you like this video, be sure to hit the like button and share these messages with everyone by sharing the video on social media and talking about these things too. And lastly, check out the links in the description below for other resources for your masculine and personal development and living the life that you want to as an independent man. And if you can afford to donate, please do so with the PayPal link below because your support funds me doing this work and fighting the good fight for men like you. And you can stay tuned for part 2 coming out soon on advanced manipulation tactics. And make sure you subscribe so you'll be notified when that is. And until then, take care of yourselves, men, because no woman out there is going to.